All right, so we're going to continue our talk about the United States in World War II. And get on to the war itself. Now, this is something, again, that can be very complicated, and I'm going to try to simplify as much as I can and keep brief because I know this isn't the biggest focus for a lot of you. Again, if you're interested in learning more, you can take one of my upper level classes on World War II. There's also a great book by David Kennedy. It's a two-part book, Freedom from Fear is part of it, the United States at World War II, David Kennedy. And it's a really good book. It's big, but it's a good book. There's another really good one called V was for Victory. That's about the United States on the home front. That's a really good book as well. So I can recommend books if any of you are interested. And again, there's a lot of really good documentary films on the United States and the war. But I want to talk a little bit about the war in Europe. So you know that the United States declares war in December of 1941 after the attack at Pearl Harbor. The reality is, once again, as it did in World War I, it takes us a while to get there. It takes us some time to really get spooled up because, again, we have to recruit men, we have to, train men, we have to equip men, and we've been preparing for this, but it still takes some time. And then two, we need to think about strategy because the Germans have taken over all of Europe. They are well prepared. They are in good place. Great Britain, our ally here, is barely hanging on. France has already fallen to Germany. So Germany really does control all of this, right? All of this part of Europe, including Finland and Norway, and they control all of North Africa. So the big dilemma is, what do we do with this fight? We've got our ally, Great Britain, and of course, all of her empire. We've got the Soviet Union here. So the one advantage to this is that Germany is fighting on two fronts. They're fighting against Great Britain in the West. They're fighting against the Soviet Union in the East. The disadvantage, of course, is that they're winning. The Soviets are retreating and retreating and retreating. They just are completely overwhelmed by the German tactics. Of course, one piece that got forgotten or not taught in a lot of the history classes I took when I was younger was the fact that the Germans, in their massive drive to the east, we talk about that they kept going and going and going in this blitzkrieg, this lightning warfare where they just pushed everybody back so fast. They hit a lot of their German soldiers on drugs, on meth, basically to keep them awake and going in their fighting. So it didn't last long, but it was effective, I guess, at that point. Don't do meth. That's not what I'm recommending. So they're fighting a two-front war, but again, they're winning. The British are barely hanging on. So the United States gets on this war effort, and how do you do it? What are you going to do? Well, the Soviet Union, Joseph Stalin is the head of the Soviet Union, and he really wanted the United States to come over and attack at France, right? To base out of Great Britain and attack France and push on Germany. The reality is the United States was not ready to attack France. The United States was ill-experienced, ill-equipped, and just not ready for that kind of fight that it would have been. And Winston Churchill, who's in charge in Great Britain, didn't want to either. He wanted to kind of nibble at the edges rather than a full-on attack. Stalin and the Soviet Union, of course, wanted the United States to attack here right away, so Germany would turn more of their fight against in France and relieve some of the pressure in the Soviet Union. Something like 20 million Soviets die in World War II. It's really pretty horrific. But the United States finally decides, FDR decides to go with Winston Churchill's plan, and we attack first at North Africa. So again, here's Casablanca. If you've seen the great film Casablanca, which if you have not, you should. It's a great American classic film. But we attack at North Africa, and the United States attacks from the west here, and the British are going to attack from the east, basing here in Egypt and coming across. And this isn't going to be until 1943 that we're able to regain control of North Africa from the Germans and the Italians, who have controlled Libya as well. So, North Africa had been controlled by the French. You still have French there. That's why in Casablanca, the character Louis is French. It's because the French had controlled Algeria and Morocco. And now we're working with the Germans, even though a lot of French didn't want to work with the Germans. So the United States makes its first battles here in North Africa. We make a lot of mistakes and face defeat in a couple of places. Kasserine Pass is one of them here, because the Germans are just good, and they have a lot of great equipment, including the tank. There's a lot of tank battles here. Rommel is the German tank commander who is so good at what he does. But finally, the Americans and the British do defeat the Germans and force them out of North Africa, which is a huge victory and a line of perseverance. The United States then moves into Sicily, which is this kind of triangle here in the south of Italy. And then we move up the boot of Italy. And really this fight for Italy lasts the entire war. It's 1943 when we finally get across here. And then we are in Italy the entire war. We liberate Rome in June of 1944 and fight all the way up Italy for the rest of the war. And remember, Italy is mountainous, and the mountains get higher as you get closer to Switzerland here. So we're constantly fighting the mountains. If you want to study some of the most interesting battles of the war, of course, study the war in Italy, the mountain rangers that are doing the fighting there. Monte Cassino, the destruction of Monte Cassino is very devastating as well. The Soviets are continually fighting and pushing back Germany. You could see the lines here that show how far they're able to go and when. And the big attack that so many Americans think of when we think of World War II, of course, is the invasion of Normandy. Normandy is a region of France, which is this coastal region here. So that's why we say the invasion of Normandy, but it's the invasion of France, often known as D-Day, though every attack was a D-Day, but this is, kind of become legendary. This is on June 6th, 1944. The United States is finally able to attack there at Caen. And again, this is with our allies for certain. You have these beaches that the British and the Canadians and the Americans all take in June of 1944. The Americans are at beaches that had been codenamed Utah and Omaha, and the British and the Canadians are at Gold, Juno, and Sword. The fighting at Omaha Beach is the most infamous. That's the fighting that was seen in the film Saving Private Ryan. There's also a great old film that depicts the battle for Normandy that I really love. It's got its problems, obviously. It's done in the 1960s, but it is called The Longest Day. The Longest Day. And if you're a movie buff, it's got every movie star from that era. It's all men. I don't know. There might be one or two women in the whole thing, and it's almost all white men as well. Very heroic, very, but it does show the tragedy of the war and the complication of it. It's based on Cornelius Ryan's book, The Longest Day. And it's really, if you want to just get an general understanding of the battle for Normandy and the invasion on D-Day there on June 6, 1944, it really is the best film. You can find it on Netflix or Amazon or wherever, but it really is worth your time. But it's this huge battle to get onto the beaches here across the English Channel. We cross here rather than this shorter distance so that we can secure this whole back end of France and not be caught in our backside by the Germans. And then we slowly begin pushing across France towards Germany. So in the spring, the summer and fall of 1944 through the spring of 1945, the United States and our allies, the British, the Canadians, and others are pushing across France towards Germany. We're pushing up Italy here towards Germany. The Soviets are pushing across Eastern Europe towards Germany, and Germany is slowly being pressed. We've defeated, by the summer of 1944, we've defeated their air force, we've neutralized their submarines, and they just become more and more pressed. They have one final big battle, one final push in December of 1944 called the Battle of the Bulge, but that too is defeated. It takes a month. It's not till mid-January of 1945 that they're really defeated there. But then it's just a matter of time as we squeeze closer and closer and closer to occupying Berlin and defeating the Germans. In April of 1945, FDR, Franklin Roosevelt, the American president, dies of a brain hemorrhage. Shortly thereafter, and completely unrelated, Adolf Hitler commits suicide in his bunker. He first marries his girlfriend, his mistress, and they marry, and then they poison the dog and poison themselves with cyanide capsules and commit suicide. Hitler really did die in April of 1945. And in May 1945, the Germany surrenders. This is May 8th, 1945. It's called VE Day, Victory in Europe Day. This, today we often think of this as a peace sign, but it was V for victory in this period as well. So, Europe is defeated, or Germany is defeated in Europe and all of the German Empire, but there's still war ongoing in the Pacific. And I'll give us a little stop here, and then we'll finish the war by